I never thought I'd be standing in the gleaming hallway of Boston General Hospital, holding my mother's life in my hands. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same woman who had pushed me aside for her perfect new family now needed me more than her precious stepdaughters. But let me start from the beginning, because this story of betrayal and redemption began long before today's emergency call. My name is Emma Bennett, and 3 years ago my life changed when my mother married William Crawford, bringing his two daughters, Sophia and Lily, into our once peaceful home. I was 25 then, working as a medical researcher at Harvard's prestigious genetics lab, living in our family home's converted basement apartment while saving for my own place. The day everything changed is still crystal clear in my memory. It was a sunny Sunday morning, and I was in my small basement lab, reviewing genetic markers for my research project. Emma, my mother's voice carried down the stairs. Family meeting, now. I sighed, carefully placing my slides in their holder. These family meetings had become more frequent since William and his daughters moved in 6 months ago. Usually they involved some new house rule that mysteriously benefited my stepsisters while making my life more difficult. When I reached the living room, they were all there. My mother, Catherine, looking elegant as always in her designer clothes. William with his perfectly groomed silver hair and calculating eyes. Sophia 23, scrolling through her phone with practiced disinterest, and Lily 20, perched on the armrest of her father's chair like a pampered cat. Finally Sophia muttered, not looking up from her phone. Some of us have places to be. I ignored her, taking my usual spot on the ottoman near the window. My mother cleared her throat, her fingers nervously adjusting her pearl necklace. A tell I'd known since childhood. Emma dear, she began, her voice carrying that false sweetness I'd grown to dread. William and I have been discussing the house situation. I felt my stomach tighten. The house, my childhood home, the place my late father had left to us, had been a point of contention since the wedding. Sophia and Lily need proper rooms for their businesses. William interjected. Sophia's fashion blog is taking off, and Lily's makeup tutorials need a professional setup. I looked around my childhood home's living room, already transformed by William's modern touch. Gone were the warm, comfortable furnishings my father had loved, replaced by sleek, cold pieces that looked like they belonged in a magazine rather than a home. What does that have to do with me? I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. My mother's smile tightened. Well, dear, we think it's time to make some changes. The girls need the upper floors for their work, and your hobby space in the basement isn't really being used efficiently. My hobby space, I repeated incredulously. You mean my research lab? The one I built with my own money. The one that's currently running studies for Harvard Medical. Oh please. Sophia rolled her eyes. Playing with test tubes isn't a real job. My fashion blog made $10,000 last month. That's wonderful, sweetheart. My mother beamed at her before turning back to me. Emma, you need to understand. The girls are building their futures. They need proper space to grow their social media presence. And what about my future? I asked quietly. What about my research? William leaned forward, his businessman smile in place. We've come up with a solution that works for everyone. We're converting the basement into a proper suite for Sophia's photography studio and Lily's makeup setup. You can move your equipment to the garden shed. We'll have it wired for electricity. The garden shed, where my father used to keep his tools, where we'd spent countless weekends together, him teaching me how to fix things, encouraging my curiosity about how things worked. Now they wanted to relegate my life's work to that tiny space. No, I said firmly. That's not happening. My lab stays where it is. Emma, my mother's voice hardened. This isn't a discussion. The contractors start tomorrow. I stood up, my hands shaking. That lab contains sensitive equipment, ongoing experiments, and valuable research data. You can't just move it to a shed. Oh, for heaven's sake, Sophia snapped. It's not like you're curing cancer or anything. The irony of her statement hit me like a physical blow. My current research project was actually focused on identifying genetic markers for early cancer detection. Not that any of them had bothered to ask. Actually, I started, but my mother cut me off. Emma, enough. This is still my house, and I'm making this decision for the family's benefit. The girls need this opportunity. And what about what I need? I asked, looking at the woman who had once supported all my dreams. What about what Dad would have wanted? The moment I mentioned my father, I knew I'd made a tactical error. My mother's face closed off, and William moved in for the kill. Your father isn't here, he said smoothly. And your mother and I agree this is best for the family. Either accept the new arrangement, or perhaps it's time you found your own place to live. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to defend me. To remember all the nights she'd sat with me doing science homework, all the times she'd bragged about her daughter the researcher. Instead she looked away, her attention drawn to Lily, who was showing her something on her phone. "Look, Mom," Lily exclaimed. "My last makeup tutorial got 50,000 views. That's wonderful, darling." My mother gushed, completely forgetting the conversation at hand. "You're going to be such a success." Something broke inside me at that moment. It wasn't just about the lab or the basement. It was about watching my mother erase me from her life, piece by piece, replacing me with her shiny new family. "You know what?" I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Keep the basement, keep the whole house. I'll be gone by the end of the week." That got their attention. My mother looked up, finally concern flickering across her face. "Emma, don't be dramatic. We're not asking you to leave. No, you're just asking me to squeeze my entire career into a garden shed so your stepdaughters can have more space for their selfies. How dare you belittle our work?" Sophia stood up, her perfectly made-up face twisted in anger. "Just because you'd rather play mad scientist in a basement," Sophia William warned, though I caught the slight smile he tried to hide. "Emma, be reasonable. This arrangement benefits everyone." I laughed, a hollow sound that made my mother flinch. "Benefits everyone. Let's talk about benefits. Let's talk about how I've been paying rent for that basement while your daughters live here free. Let's talk about how my research grants have been helping with the house expenses. Let's talk about how quickly you forgot that Dad left this house to me and Mom, not to your social media influencers." The room fell silent. My mother's face had gone pale, and William's smile had disappeared. Sophia and Lily exchanged glances, perhaps realizing for the first time that their perfect new life had been built on someone else's foundation. "Emma," my mother started, but I was already heading for the stairs. "I'll have my things out by Friday." I called over my shoulder. "Don't worry about the garden shed. I'm sure it'll make a great storage space for all those sponsorship products you're so proud of." I spent the next few days packing up my lab with methodical precision, cataloging each piece of equipment, each sample, each dataset. My colleagues at Harvard were surprisingly understanding, offering me temporary lab space until I could find a permanent solution. One of them, Dr. Sarah Chen, even offered me a spare room in her house. "You can stay as long as you need," she insisted. "And we have a climate-controlled basement that would be perfect for your equipment." I was carefully packing my microscope when I heard footsteps on the stairs. My mother appeared, looking uncertain in a way I hadn't seen since my father's funeral. "Do you need any help?" she asked softly. "Now you're interested in my work?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "A bit late for that, isn't it?" She wandered around the lab, running her finger along the edge of a counter. "I remember when you first set this up. Your father was so proud. He always said you'd do great things." "Don't," I warned. "Don't bring Dad into this. Not now. Emma, please, you don't have to leave. We can figure something out." I carefully closed the microscope case before turning to face her. "Like what?" "Like cramming years of research into a garden shed. Like pretending I don't hear Sophia and Lily making fun of my work. Like watching you forget everything Dad and I built here." "That's not fair," she protested. "I haven't forgotten anything. Really." I picked up a framed photo from my desk. Me at my college graduation, flanked by my beaming parents. "When was the last time you asked about my research? When was the last time you cared about anything in my life as much as you care about Sophia's blog numbers or Lily's followers?" She had no answer for that. Instead, she picked up a stack of papers from my desk, frowning at the complex diagrams. "I just want what's best for everyone." "No," I corrected her, taking the papers from her hands. "You want what's best for your new family. I'm just inconvenient background noise." "That's not true. You're my daughter." "Am I? Because lately it feels like Sophia and Lily are your daughters and I'm just the stranger living in your basement." Her face crumpled slightly. "I never meant for you to feel that way. But I do," I said quietly. "And the worst part is, you didn't even notice until I decided to leave." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back, busying myself with more packing. "Where will you go?" she asked finally. "Dr. Chen offered me a place to stay. She has space for my lab too." Turns out some people actually value scientific research. The dig hit home. I saw her wince. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. I sealed another box. Because if I stay, I'll keep hoping for things to go back to how they were. And they never will they? She didn't answer, but her silence said everything. I heard more footsteps on the stairs, and Sophia appeared, wearing what she probably thought was a conciliatory expression. The contractors need to measure the space, she announced. They're thinking of putting my ring lights along that wall. And just like that, my mother's attention shifted. Oh, that would be perfect, darling. And maybe we could do a feature wall for your backdrop. I watched them discuss paint colors and lighting angles, standing in my lab, my space, already planning how to repurpose it for their social media empire. Neither of them seemed to notice when I picked up a box and headed upstairs. By Friday, my lab was empty, my equipment safely relocated to Dr. Chen's basement. As I packed the last of my personal belongings from my apartment area, I found something that made me pause. A small notebook, my father's handwriting filling its pages with notes about genetic markers and inheritance patterns. Always follow the science, Emma, he used to say. It never lies, even when people do. I slipped the notebook into my bag, a piece of my real family to take with me. As I carried the final box up the stairs, I could hear Sophia and Lily's excited voices from the kitchen. My mother's laughter joining theirs. The sound used to make me happy. Now it just reminded me of everything I'd lost. William was waiting by the front door. Your mother's upset, he said, as if I were the one who had caused all this. Is she? I replied. I'm sure Sophia and Lily will cheer her up with their latest viral video. He frowned. There's no need for sarcasm. We're still family. I looked at him for a long moment. No, William. You, Sophia and Lily, are a family. I'm just the inconvenient reminder of my mother's past life. But don't worry, I won't be bothering any of you anymore. I walked out without saying goodbye to my mother. Maybe it was petty, but I couldn't bear to watch her choose them over me one more time. As I loaded the last box into my car, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. I looked just like her, the same dark hair and green eyes. But unlike her, I wouldn't forget who I was, or where I came from. What I didn't know then was that my departure was just the beginning. In 3 years, everything would change again, and the research they had so casually dismissed would become the most important thing in their lives. But that's a story for another day. The day my mother's life came to depend on the daughter she'd pushed aside. As I drove away from my childhood home, I remembered something else my father used to say. The truth always comes out in the end, Emma. And when it does, make sure you're ready for it. I was ready. I just didn't know for what. 3 years passed in a blur of research, breakthroughs, and building a new life. I barely heard from my family, except for the occasional holiday text from my mother, and seeing Sophia and Lily's faces plastered across social media, their influence growing with each passing year. I threw myself into my work, channeling all my hurt into research. Dr. Chen's support proved invaluable. Under her mentorship, I developed a groundbreaking method for identifying rare genetic markers in bone marrow. Our paper was published in leading medical journals, and suddenly, the basement scientist was being invited to speak at international conferences. It was after one such conference in London that I received the call that would change everything. Emma? My mother's voice sounded strange, strained. We need to talk. I stepped away from the crowded conference hall, finding a quiet corner. I'm in London right now. Can it wait? No, she said, and I heard something I'd never heard in her voice before. Fear. I'm in the hospital. Boston General. The doctors, they found something. My medical training kicked in immediately. What are your symptoms? They're calling it some rare blood condition. The treatments aren't working. They say I need a bone marrow transplant. But, she paused, her voice breaking. They can't find a match. The irony of the situation hit me like a physical blow. My research, the work they'd dismissed so easily, focused on exactly this type of rare genetic matching. Have they tested Sophia and Lily? I asked, already knowing the answer. They're not matches, she replied quietly. William isn't either. The doctors say they need someone with a specific genetic marker. They've searched the national database, but nothing matches. I finished for her. Of course not. The marker they were looking for was rare. appearing in less than 0.1% of the population. Emma? My mother's voice was barely a whisper now. I know I have no right to ask, but I'll be on the next flight, I said, already pulling up airline schedules on my phone. Have your doctors send me the test results. The flight from London to Boston gave me 7 hours to review my mother's medical files, sent over by her desperate doctors. The genetic marker they were searching for was one I knew intimately. I'd spent the last 3 years studying it. When I arrived at Boston General, I found the waiting room occupied by familiar faces. William looked older, the silver in his hair now more prominent. Sophia and Lily sat huddled together, their perfectly curated social media personas cracking under real-world pressure. Neither had posted anything in days, a sure sign of their distress. Emma? Lily spotted me first, jumping up. Thank God you're here. Maybe you can understand all this medical stuff they're talking about. I nodded briefly, heading straight for the nurse's station. I'm Dr. Bennett. I'm here about Catherine Crawford. The nurse looked up, recognition flooding her face. Dr. Bennett, the geneticist. We've been reading your papers on rare genetic markers. Are you consulting on this case? Something like that, I replied, accepting the clipboard she handed me. William appeared at my shoulder. You're a doctor now. I've always been a doctor, I corrected him. A research physician. You just never bothered to ask. Before he could respond, Dr. Sarah Moore, a colleague I'd collaborated with on several papers, emerged from my mother's room. Emma? She exclaimed. I should have known you'd come. We've been trying everything, but the genetic marker we need is incredibly rare. The chances of finding a match. I know, I interrupted. I want to run some tests. My lab equipment is still at Dr. Chen's. I can have results within hours. Your lab equipment? Sophia stepped forward. You mean you're still playing with test tubes in someone's basement? Dr. Moore turned to her, eyebrows raised. Playing with test tubes? Dr. Bennett is one of the leading experts in genetic marker identification. Her research has revolutionized how we match bone marrow donors. The look on Sophia's face would have been satisfying if the situation weren't so serious. William cleared his throat uncomfortably. Can you help her? He asked, his businessman's confidence faltering. I looked through the window into my mother's room. She looked small in the hospital bed, her usually perfect hair limp against the pillows. For a moment I saw her as she used to be, the mother who had encouraged my love of science, who had held me through failed experiments and celebrated every success. I need to run some tests, I said finally, and then we'll talk. The next few hours were a blur of lab work and analysis. Dr. Chen met me at her house, helping me process the samples. When the results appeared on my screen, I sat back, letting out a long breath. Well? Dr. Chen asked softly. It's exactly what I thought, I replied, staring at the genetic sequences before me. The marker they're looking for, it runs in families, specifically my father's family. So you're a match. I nodded slowly. A perfect match. The only one they're likely to find. Dr. Chen squeezed my shoulder. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What indeed? The daughter they'd pushed aside was now their only hope. The research they'd dismissed as a hobby could save my mother's life. The irony was almost too perfect. When I returned to the hospital, they were all waiting. Dr. Moore had joined them, along with the head of oncology. Did you find anything? William demanded as soon as I walked in. I handed the results to Dr. Moore, who reviewed them with widening eyes. This is Emma. This is incredible. You're a perfect match. The marker sequence is exactly what we need. What does that mean? Lily asked, looking between us. It means, Dr. Moore explained, that Dr. Bennett here is the only compatible donor we've found. Without her bone marrow, your stepmother's chances of survival are virtually zero. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia and Lily stared at me, their carefully maintained facades crumbling. William seemed to age years in moments. You can save her? He asked, his voice rough. The research you dismissed, I replied quietly. The work you thought was just playing in a basement. It led me to study this exact genetic marker. I've spent 3 years mapping these sequences, understanding how they work, developing matching protocols. Why didn't you tell us? Sophia whispered. When should I have done that? I asked. While you were converting my lab into your photography studio. Or maybe while you were mocking my little science projects. Emma? Dr. Moore interrupted gently. We need to know, are you willing to be a donor? I looked through the window again. My mother was awake now, watching us with fearful eyes. She'd chosen her new family over me, pushed me aside for her perfect stepdaughters. Now her life depended on the daughter she'd forgotten. I'll do it, I said finally. Not for any of you. I looked at William and his daughters. But for the mother who used to believe in me. For the woman who taught me that family means something. Dr. Moore nodded, already reaching for consent forms. We'll start the preparation process immediately. Emma, you know this won't be easy. I know, I replied. But then nothing about family ever is. As the medical team swept into action, I felt William's hand on my arm. Emma, I cut him off. This doesn't fix anything. This doesn't erase the past 3 years. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do, not because I forgive any of you. He nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. We were wrong about you, about everything. Yes, I agreed simply. You were. As I walked into my mother's room to explain what would happen next, I remembered my father's words again. The truth always comes out in the end. The truth had come out all right. But this was just the beginning of our story. The bone marrow transplant procedure was scheduled for the following morning. As I lay in the hospital bed next to my mother's room, going through the pre-donation protocols, I heard a soft knock on my door. It was Lily, looking uncharacteristically plain without her usual perfectly curated appearance. Can I come in? She asked hesitantly. I nodded, watching as she perched awkwardly on the visitor's chair. For a moment neither of us spoke. I found your old research journals, she finally said. In the basement. We were packing up some things, and there was this box. She pulled out a worn notebook. This is about the same thing that's wrong with Mom, isn't it? I took the notebook, recognizing my father's handwriting mixed with my early research notes. Yes, Dad had a theory about genetic markers in our family line. I based my research on his initial finding. All those times we made fun of your work. Lily's voice cracked. We were so stupid, so shallow. Yes, you were, I agreed, but without malice. But this isn't about revenge, or making you feel guilty. This is about saving our mother's life. Our mother? She repeated softly. You still think of her that way, even after everything. I looked down at the notebook in my hands. She was my mother for 25 years before she was your stepmother. Those years don't just disappear, no matter how hard everyone tried to erase them. Before Lily could respond, Dr. Moore entered with the final consent forms. Everything looks good, Emma. We'll start the procedure at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Your genetic markers are exactly what we need. It's almost miraculous. Not miraculous, I corrected her. Scientific. This is what happens when you follow the research instead of dismissing it. The night passed slowly. I could hear movement in my mother's room next door. Nurses checking vitals. William's low murmur. Sophia's occasional question about the procedure. Around midnight, my door opened again. Emma? It was my mother's voice, weak but determined. She was in a wheelchair, a nurse hovering behind her. Can we talk? The nurse helped her settle near my bed, before leaving us alone. In the dim light, my mother looked older, frailer, but her eyes were clear. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Yes, I do. After how we treated you. This isn't about how you treated me, I interrupted. This is about science, about genetics, about the research Dad started, and I continued, even when everyone thought it was worthless. She flinched at that. I never thought it was worthless. I was just lost. After your father died, I was so lost. William and the girls, they seemed like a chance to start over. To be someone new. And I was a reminder of who you used to be. You were a reminder of everything I'd lost, she admitted. You look so much like him, think like him. Every time I saw you working in that lab, I saw your father. I turned to look at her fully. Dad would be ashamed of how you handled things. I know, she whispered, tears falling now. But he would be so proud of you, of what you've accomplished, of who you've become. Morning came too quickly. As the medical team prepped me for the procedure, I saw my family gathered outside. William looking worried, Sophia and Lily holding hands, my mother being prepared in her own room. Dr. Moore appeared in her surgical gear. Ready? Just one thing, I said, reaching for my phone. I pulled up a document and handed it to William, who had stepped into the room. This is a research grant proposal. The genetic marker mapping project needs funding to continue helping other families. Your company's medical division could benefit from backing it. William took the phone, scanning the document. This is impressive. The potential applications are worth more than a few social media sponsorships. I finished for him. Something to think about while we're in surgery. The procedure itself took several hours. When I woke in recovery, Sophia was sitting beside my bed, scrolling through what looked like medical research papers on her tablet. Light reading, I asked groggily. She started, then gave a sheepish smile. I've been reading your published works. I don't understand half of it, but it's amazing. All this time we thought you were just playing in the basement. Yeah, she set down the tablet. Dad's talking to the board right now about funding your research properly. He says it's time Mason Industries remembered its medical research roots. I nodded, too tired to respond fully. Over the next few days, as both my mother and I recovered, I noticed subtle changes in the family dynamic. Lily started asking questions about genetic research, showing genuine interest. Sophia used her social media influence to highlight medical research funding needs. William spent hours in discussions with Dr. Moore about expanding the company's research division. A week after the procedure, Dr. Moore confirmed that the transplant had been successful. My mother's body had accepted the bone marrow, and her condition was improving rapidly. Your research didn't just save your mother, Dr. Moore told me. The mapping protocol you developed will help us match other patients more efficiently. You've changed the field, Emma. As I prepared to leave the hospital, my mother asked to see me one last time. She was sitting up in bed, looking more like her old self. What happens now? She asked. Now, I go back to my lab, continue my research, live my life. And us? I considered her question carefully. That depends on you. All of you. Real change requires more than just words or guilt or gratitude. Will you let us try to be a real family? A real family supports each other, I said. A real family doesn't dismiss dreams or mock passions. A real family remembers its foundations while building its future. She reached for my hand, and this time I let her take it. Teach me, she said simply. Teach me how to be that kind of family again. 6 months later, I stood in my new lab at Mason Industries, surrounded by state-of-the-art equipment and a team of dedicated researchers. The genetic marker mapping project had expanded, helping families across the country find matching donors. Sophia had traded fashion blogging for medical research advocacy, using her influence to raise awareness and funding. Lily was taking pre-med courses, discovering her own passion for genetics. My mother visited regularly, not just as a patient but as a mother trying to rebuild bridges. It wasn't perfect. Too much had happened for that, but it was a start. On my desk next to my father's old notebook sat a new photo frame. In it was a picture of all of us at the hospital on the day my mother was discharged. Not a perfect family, but a real one, built on truth, science, and second chances. Sometimes I thought, it takes nearly losing everything to remember what matters most. The truth had come out, just as my father predicted, but he'd forgotten to mention one thing. Sometimes, the truth doesn't just reveal what's broken. Sometimes it shows you how to fix it.